Hey y'all, I'm back with another sponsored video. This one is about Diane Downs. Now, I'm sure a lot of my viewers have already known about this crazy lady. She's one of the darkest Leos I've ever learned about. So before I get into her chart, let me just read a bit about her story. Elizabeth Diane Downs, born August 7th, 1955, is an American criminal who murdered her daughter and attempted to murder her other two children near Springfield, Oregon on May 19th, 1983. Following the crime, she made claims to police that a man had attempted to carjack her and had shot the children. She was convicted in 1984 and sentenced to life in prison plus 50 years. She briefly escaped in 1987 but was quickly recaptured. Downs has been repeatedly denied parole, and psychiatrists have diagnosed her with narcissistic, histrionic, and antisocial personality disorders, with one labeling her as a deviant sociopath. All right, so let's get into this story. Now, there's a made-for-TV movie called Small Sacrifices that's based on a book by Anne Rule about this Diane Downs story. So it's free on YouTube if you want to check it out to familiarize yourself with this story if you haven't done so already. This video has been sponsored by Justin. Thank you, Justin, for sponsoring this video. And Justin wants to know, he just has one question. Why did she do what she did? All right, so as I get into her chart, you'll get the answer to this question. So here she is right here being taken into custody. As you can see, she has this look on her face that she's not distraught about the death of her daughter and the maiming of her other two children. Numerology, so her birth number is 7. 7 can pertain to lies and deception. Also sacrifice, so she sacrificed or tried to sacrifice all 3 of her children so that she could have a life free of them and basically be with this guy who didn't even want her at the time. Victimization, so she victimized her children. Addictions, basically she was addicted to penis. Films and documentaries made about this story, and also prison. Her life path number is 8, and that 8 can make one ambitious, opportunistic, but also mean, cruel, and sadistic. And it represents the police and the feds being involved in this case, and where she's immortalized, not in a good way, in a bad way, immortalized in terms of being one of the most prolific, murderous moms in history. And 8 can pertain to death as well. Here she is with her husband, her ex-husband, and her 3 children. So here's Diane Downs' chart. She has Aquarius rising, 20th degree. At that 20th degree is about awakening. So at certain times in a person's life, the 20th degree will bring forth awakenings where the person will have new goals, a new home, new friends, new relationships. But what's really important is the 20th degree of Leo on that 7th house cusp, because that's representing her daughter waking up out of the coma, and where she testified against her mother, and that led to her mother's conviction. So Diane Downs has Moon in Aries. That explains those thinned out eyebrows that she has. South Node in Gemini in the 4th house, which is the underlying reason why she is the way she is. I'll get into that more in a minute. Uranus in Cancer, Venus, Jupiter, Sun, Mercury, Mars, and Pluto all in Leo. Neptune in Libra, Saturn in Scorpio, Black Moon Lilith in Sagittarius, North Node in Sagittarius, Chiron in Aquarius. She has Pisces intercepted in the 1st, Virgo intercepted in the 7th. So that's 6-point Leo stellium. Again, it consists of Venus, Jupiter, Sun, Mercury, Mars, and Pluto. That's some heavy Leo energy, which can lead to extreme narcissism. Also, children are a major theme with Leo, And with this 6-point Leo stellium, the children theme is extra pronounced. Also, this makes her an attention whore, which contributes to the narcissism, and where she's an actress, her performances, and where Diane is a creator and lover of drama. Also, where she's lovesick. Naive and childish. Naive in that she believed that her story would pass the scrutiny of the police, the feds, and all that. Being hyper-focused on men, being male-centered, this is a common problem with Leo women, and with Diane, it's multiplied by 6. So Leo rules men, including fathers and husbands. So when you're dealing with a Leo woman, she's likely to place a lot of emphasis, a lot of focus on men in her life, starting with the father. Children are treated as extensions of herself, no distinction, so she was able to easily get rid of that part of her life. Here she is right here in police custody. I think this was during the trial. As you can see, she's pregnant. Now, her 6th house is overpopulated. So 5 of the planets in Leo are tightly packed in that 6th house. So this is basically representing her orchestrating the incident with her children. Children were viewed as tools or servants. And with this 6th house emphasis, basically it shows that Diane needed constant reassurance, validation, and sex from men due to insecurities. With that 6th house, it's like you need somebody like it's your nutrition. You need a daily dose of a person. And when that daily dose is taken away, you could lose your damn mind. Her interactions with law enforcement officers. The acronym for law enforcement officers is LEO, so makes a lot of sense. Her performance is carefully crafted affectation. Affectation meaning behavior, speech, or writing that is artificial and designed to impress. Also, this is indicative of histrionics. So basically exaggerated emotions, all that drama, and where she's hyper-focused. So she could either be hyper-focused on children or hyper-focused on men. Egomania. So she has Sun conjunct Jupiter. So what I'm doing here is I'm breaking down this stellium and talking about the conjunctions contained in this stellium. So this Sun conjunct Jupiter can produce an overblown ego, an insatiable need for attention, either from children or men. So children or men will be her whole world with this Jupiter influence, especially with Jupiter ruling her 1st house via intercepted Pisces and the 10th house. But it's all to fulfill her egocentric desires. She has Mercury conjunct Mars and Pluto. Will act out her dark, evil thoughts, obsessive compulsive. So you know how we all have dark thoughts from time to time, but when you have Mercury conjoined to Mars, and then you add Pluto into the mix, this is a person that will act out their dark thoughts. Sex is always on her mind. Being manipulative, seductive, and controlling. Committing murder and attempted murder in the car, Mercury representing the car. Shooting herself in the arm, Mercury's representing her arm. Blaming the shooting on a man, Mars is where the man comes in. Hungry like the wolf energy. Now, when she tried to murder her 3 children, the song Hungry Like the Wolf by Duran Duran was playing. And when the prosecutor would play that song for her surviving daughter, the daughter would get triggered and she would start remembering details of that tragic event. Here's Diane with her 3 children. Diane looking all crazy with those Sampaku eyes. Sun in Leo square Saturn in Scorpio, both at the 14th degree. Now that 14th degree can show up in the charts of people who have been incarcerated. And Diane is no exception. 14th degree could produce challenges with movement, And it also pertains to the car situation. Sun square Saturn is one of the darkest aspects a person can have. And it doesn't automatically produce someone that's dark-sided or evil. But in Diane's case, with Saturn being in Scorpio, it was easy for her to go on the dark side. So Sun in Leo square Saturn in Scorpio, that is a classic aspect for the death of a child. And it was one of her daughters who died at her hands. Also, Sun square Saturn can make one mean, cruel, heartless, and unloving, hypersexual, especially with Saturn in the ninth house. That ninth house produces excess, and it can produce an overwhelming urge, an overwhelming need. Problems with the father, having an abusive father. Now, Diane said that she was abused by her father, and she later recanted those claims. But I wouldn't be surprised if she actually was abused by her father, considering these aspects in her chart. More about that in a minute. Under heavy demonic influence with Saturn and Scorpio in the ninth house, basically a demon in the flesh, since she did not try to resist this influence. So some people with Sun square Saturn, especially this particular Sun square Saturn with the Sun in Leo, Saturn in Scorpio, they'll do everything in their power to try to resist those demonic influences. Other people will give themselves over to those demonic influences, which is what Diane did. Basically, this is representing Diane being a truly evil woman, especially when you add the other planets in Leo into the mix. Also, it represents the hospital staff that become suspicious of Diane's story due to her disposition. So Saturn is ruling the 12th house. So Saturn in Scorpio is also representing the hospital staff that were suspicious. Mercury and Mars in Leo square Saturn in Scorpio. These squares can produce a devilish mind and actions, can make her sadistic and cruel. Represents her daughter Cheryl saying she wanted to kill herself after she was caught jumping on the bed. Issues with paternity. Explains her dead eyes. Referring to the fetus that she was carrying as slime. Represents her hiding the gun. Daddy, do you even love me? Sun and Jupiter in Leo square Saturn in Scorpio. In adulthood, Diane spoke extremely negatively of her father, criticizing his lecturing, disciplinarianism, and the power he had over her mother. He spent way too much time with my mom, and my mom spent no time with me, Downs later said. She has testified that her father sexually abused her when she was a child, although she later recanted the allegations, and both of her parents denied that any incident took place. So the fact that Jupiter is ruling the midheaven, that's representing the mom, and it's conjoined to the sun, that is showing that the father gave all the attention to the mother. And Diane did not like that. But it's also showing that there was some issue regarding the truth in terms of her relationship with her father. So I'm proposing that Diane was actually abused by her father, could have been sexual abuse with that Saturn and Scorpio, but the mother didn't she didn't acknowledge Diane's claims. She basically sided with the father. So basically, Diane is being gaslit as a child, you know, when she goes to her mother, and this is speculation on my part, where she goes to her mother, tells her that, yeah, dad touched me, and mom is saying, no, you were just imagining that or whatever. I believe this lie that took place in the beginning was the springboard for her lies later on in life and her mental health issues. After high school, she enrolled at Pacific Coast Baptist Bible College in Orange, California, but was expelled after 1 year for promiscuous behavior and returned to her parents' home in Arizona. So her being expelled from college due to being promiscuous, that's dealing with these squares as well. Venus in Leo square Saturn in Scorpio. Her need to satisfy her sexual urges trumps her relationship with her children. Being too controlling with her children, intimidating them, extreme forms of punishment, being abusive. Also, this shows that she would have been jealous of any attention her children received. And where it was not about love with her lovers, it was about sex and control. And this whole sex and control, I believe, started with her father. Not feeling loved or accepted by her father. Attracting a man who does not want children. Fixed T-square nightmare. So she has a fixed T-square in her chart involving Venus, Jupiter, Sun, Mercury, and Mars in Leo, Saturn in Scorpio, and the Aquarius ascendant. So this quote right here is dealing with this T-square. Downs has been repeatedly denied parole, and psychiatrists have diagnosed her with narcissistic, histrionic, and antisocial personality disorders, with one labeling her as a deviant sociopath. She ended her next pregnancy with an abortion, but after witnessing pictures of fetuses at an anti-abortion booth in a local fair, she regretted her decision. I felt the need to do something to make amends for what I had done wrong. She's basically explaining why she got pregnant again. She testified, when I had the abortion, I was led to believe that a 6-week fetus is nothing more than mucus. She also referred to the fetus as slime in one interview. Diane later testified that Steve had a vasectomy, so she seduced a male friend, this is represented by the Aquarius ascendant, Mark Sager, who became the father of her third child. Stephen Daniel was born in 1979. Paternity issues. So this T-square is pointing to the paternity issues. Basically, she was married, but then seduced her friend so that she could get pregnant by him. And it's easy for her to get pregnant with this Leo stellium. Also with this T-square, Diane forbade everything to her children. If Danny demanded a little attention, she rejected him. But the worst was when one day I caught Cheryl jumping on her bed. I told her that it was not allowed. This is the ex-husband speaking. I made her sit down and think about what she had done. Cheryl remained calm while looking up and asked, "Is there a gun here?" That's Mercury conjunct Mars and Pluto representing what the daughter said. I replied that no, and the reason for this question, to which she told me, "I want to kill me. My mom says I'm bad." When I read that part, I was like, yo, that shit is dark as hell. So here's a video. It's called Diane Downs' Most Disturbing Interview. So I'm just going to play a little clip of it because I want to show her cold, callous demeanor when she's describing seeing her daughter face being bloody and the blood gushing out of her mouth. Let me just bring it to the section.
This is an eyewitness news.
By society, this man, as I could remember, when this man shot my daughter, my first reaction was to snap back to my childhood, to the pain that had happened to me back then.
All right, so let me just start right there. She said when the man shot her children, she snapped back to her childhood. That's that Leo stellium. And then she's talking about to the pain that happened to me. So I think she's referring to the sexual abuse she suffered at the hands of her father. Now, if she was sexually abused by her father, that's still no excuse for what she did to her children. But, you know, there's always a cause. There's always an underlying reason why someone is the way they are. And she got that 4th house Gemini South node, which makes a lot of sense. The 4th house is dealing with the father.
Advantage, my entrapment by society. This man was bigger than me. He was stronger than me. He had no power because he had a gun. He was in control and I was not. And there was nothing I could do. And I stood there and I looked at Christy reaching, and the blood that just kept gushing out of her mouth. And what do you do? You just stand there trapped. And then the gun kept firing and firing and firing. And it was monotonous. It just kept going. It was like a slow motion picture. And then he swung around towards me, and this is something that I did not recall when I was explaining to the cops, because it wasn't like a movie when I was telling them. I was telling them what happened, the important details. He shot my kids. I pushed him. I ran. And when he swung around, he was pointing. When he swung around, it hit the tips of my fingers. The gun hit the tips of my fingers, and that snapped me. And I went, wait a minute. I'm not trapped by society. I don't care if he is bigger. If I stand here and I say, yeah, here, take the keys. I mean, there's nothing I can do. You win because you have the gun. My kids are going to die. And I'm not going to let my kids die. And so instead of giving him the keys, I feigned throwing the keys. He did not take time to point the gun and shoot me, obviously, because he would have shot me the same way he did the kids. When he was swinging in the direction of the keys, firing the gun, he hit my arm. Everybody says you sure were lucky. Well, I don't feel very lucky. I couldn't tie my damn shoes for about 2 months. It is very painful. It is still painful. I have a steel plate on my arm. I will for 1.5 years. The scar is going to be there forever. I'm going to remember that night for the rest of my life, whether I want to or not. I don't think I was very lucky. I think my kids were lucky. If I had been shot the way they were, we all would have died, except maybe Danny.
What haunts you the most about that night?
What I see most is blood coming out of Christy's mouth, because that's what I see. I can't see Danny, and I can't see Cher. Sherry was laying on the floor, and driving to the hospital, I don't know the sounds that were made at the initial shooting because I was on the outside, and all I could hear, I can't hear anything but gunshots, and I can see things. That's it. Driving to the hospital, I can smell blood. I can not hear Cheryl. Cheryl's not making a sound. Danny is just crying real soft. So that sound stays in my mind, and the fact that Christy's choking, and then I'm yelling at her and screaming at her to roll over on her face, because I was trying to keep her from choking on her blood, and it just didn't dawn on me that she was shot in the chest and that the blood was coming from her chest, not going down into her chest.
Yeah. Down says her childhood and marriage flashed before her the night of the murder. Diane is
Okay, I'm going to stop right there. So you get the gist of it. I mean, you see her demeanor. She doesn't look upset at all that some man supposedly shot her children and one of the children died and all that. Basically, you're seeing a sociopath in action.
the oldest of.
So Diane has Uranus as her chart ruler because she's an Aquarius rising. It's at the 29th degree of Cancer in the 6th house. That 29th degree produces conflict, both internal and external, usually starting with the mother. It produces conflict with home, with family, and also her experiences as a mother herself. And the 29th degree produces high pressure situations and interference from third parties, and it could play out as love triangles. All of this applies to Diane's life. So Uranus in Cancer as her chart ruler is producing extreme subjectivity. Basically, Diane was existing in her own made-up world. And basically, this points to her having a crazy imagination. Emotions are fabricated with Uranus opposition Chiron. Being a mother was one of the ways she could be a tyrant. Helping a woman out by being her surrogate. So she was a surrogate mother for a woman that wanted a child. Also, this is representing Diane showing a man her breasts, with Cancer ruling the breasts, in order to entice him to let her stay with him after she escaped prison. That only lasted for about 10 days, though. Fishbowl existence. So Diane has Pisces intercepted in that first house. So it made it easy to live a lie and believe her own lies. Also, Pisces intercepted in the first house can produce a severe inferiority complex. Neptune in Libra is ruling Pisces, so this shows that she tries to overcome her inferiority complex through seduction, with Neptune being in the 8th. She will play the victim role to the hilt, refusal to assume responsibility for her actions. Also, with Neptune and Libra in the 8th house, she can easily place blame on others, even if these people are imaginary, like the man that she said shot her children. Uranus square Neptune. Her obsession with a partner disrupted her duties as a mother. So Uranus is one of her chart rulers, but so is Neptune, because Pisces is intercepted in that first house. So these chart rulers are squaring each other, which is showing serious conflict involving her being a mother versus her relationships. Represents her boyfriend saying he didn't want a woman with kids. Her refusal to admit guilt even after all these years, because with Uranus and Cancer, in her world, her story is true. And again, I believe this goes back to when she was a child. She's being abused by her father. She goes to her mother, tells the mother what's going on, and mother gaslights her, saying, oh, you just imagine that. That really didn't happen. So the lie was fostered in her, or the ability to lie, early on. And again, this is just speculation on my part, but I believe that's what happened. That's what turned Diane into a monster. Ability to disassociate in order to not feel guilty about what she did. Also, this explains the holes in her story. So Uranus and Cancer is representing her story. And then with the square with Neptune, that's all the holes in the story. Also, this square shows that she's devoted to no one but herself. Uranus chart ruler, squaring Neptune and Libra. So this quote is pertaining to this square. In her first application for parole in 2008, Downs reaffirmed her innocence. She insisted that over the years, I have told you and the rest of the world that a man shot me and my children. I have never changed the story, because this is her story. And again, she's living this totally subjective life. So anything that she basically says is what actually happened in her crazy mixed up mind. So she's the type that can believe her own lies. Lane County District Attorney Douglas Hardcliffe wrote to the parole board, Downs continues to fail to demonstrate any honest insight into her criminal behavior. Even after her conviction, she continues to fabricate new versions of events under which the crimes occurred. He also wrote that she alternately refers to her assailants as a bushy-haired stranger, 2 men wearing ski masks, or drug dealers and corrupt law enforcement officials. Downs participated in the hearing from the Valley State Prison for Women. She was not permitted a statement, but answered questions from the parole board. After 3 hours of interviews and 30 minutes of deliberation, she was denied parole. Downs had parole hearings in 2010 and 2020, which were both denied. Downs maintained her innocence in all parole hearings, which is why she's being denied. If she would admit to the truth, she would probably be paroled. But because she's holding on to this lie, she's not ready to be paroled. Now she got that whole Aquarian smirk with her being an Aquarius rising. So she has Sun, Jupiter, Mercury, Mars, and Pluto opposing the Aquarius ascendant. So this is representing Diane attempting to liberate herself from her children. Also shows that she's detached from her children. Being obsessed with a man when you add Pluto into the mix. Being a stalker. Not being one of the cool or popular kids in school. So being alienated as a result. So she came from a Christian background. Like her parents were like staunch Christians. Like those Christian fundamentalists, I guess. So they did not allow her to wear trendy clothes or listen to, popular music and all that type of stuff. So she was naturally alienated from her peers. That had a big effect upon her, because we're talking about a hardcore Leo, and Leo rules popularity. So if you're dealing with a hardcore Leo who didn't get a chance to become popular in high school, especially since she has Mercury in Leo, that's going to have an effect upon her, and it can turn into extreme attention-seeking behavior as an adult. Being ridiculed or put down by her classmates. People are just actors in the movie that she creates. So she has this Aquarius ascendant opposing that Leo stellium. So it's basically like she's this mad scientist that's creating these characters in a movie that she has made. And basically these people are not real as a result, including her children, which can explain why she was able to kill them with impunity or try to kill them. And again, those thin out eyebrows, that's that Aries moon all day. And with the Aries moon, mom comes first a lot of the times. So that's reinforcing the whole situation about where she was saying dad gave mom all the attention and he was very controlling with her. So she had no time to herself with mom. And basically that Aries moon is producing conflicts with mother, but also other women. So she would threaten her ex-boyfriend's wife because, you know, he wouldn't leave her and stuff like that. So that's that Aries moon too. And the Aries moon can be prone to violence as well and make someone very selfish, including in terms of their parenting style. Venus and Leo opposition Chiron and Aquarius. Diane came from a family with strict conservative values, and her parents forbade her to wear fashionable clothes or makeup, which made her the subject of frequent bullying. However, after the age of 14, and you know that 14 is very significant because she got Sun at the 14th degree and Saturn at the 14th degree. She became more rebellious, and she graduated from Moon Valley High School in Phoenix, where she met her future husband, Steve Downs. Despite her parents' disapproval, Downs continued the relationship. Also, this is representing how she escaped from prison by scaling an 18-foot fence, with Chiron being in that 12th house, yearning to be liberated from her children, facing the parole board. Duping delight. So in some of the interviews, Diane is displaying the whole duping delight energy, where she's basically smiling, and in some videos she's chuckling when she's recounting the story of her kids being shot. And with Jupiter, that explains how she could smile and laugh about the blood that was gushing from her daughter's mouth. So she has Venus conjoined to Jupiter. Venus and Leo is representing her daughter. The Jupiter is representing the blood, but it's also representing her making light of the situation. Also, this can make her quite inhumane when dealing with people. Mercury, Mars, and Pluto trine Sagittarius North Node. She said, "I did not marry Steve for love." Diane later said at her trial, "I married Steve to get out of the family." So this trine is representing her gaining freedom through a man. Also, this trine is representing her story being a great case study in psychology for higher education being that Sagittarius North Node, believing that she could always have more children. Being converted to a pro-lifer after seeing the Christian protesters. Takes joy in creating drama, trauma, and death. Explains why she was smiling and chuckling about the blood pouring out of her daughter's mouth. So again, this grand trine, these trines are enabling her to make light of everything, and where everything is like a joke to her. Now she has a fire grand trine consisting of the Aries moon, Venus and Jupiter in Leo, and the Sagittarius midheaven. On May 8th, 1982, Diane gave birth to a girl named Jennifer while acting as a surrogate mother, despite failing her psychiatric test twice due to their indicating signs of psychosis. So the grand trine will enable people to get away with a lot. So she was able to get away with being a surrogate mother despite her signs of psychosis. Also, this shows that she was getting off on all the attention she received during the trial. Represents her long-distance relocation from Arizona to Oregon, and her ability to easily find herself in love affairs and get pregnant. You know, narcissists, a lot of them are really good in bed. They're really good at sex, and that's how they trap their victims. And I believe Diane was no exception. She also has an air grand trine consisting of her Aquarius ascendant, South Node in Gemini, Neptune in Libra. Basically, this grand trine is representing the made-for-TV movie Small Sacrifices featuring Farrah Fawcett, and this must have made Diane feel on top of the world, especially once she found out Farrah Fawcett was playing her, because Farrah Fawcett was a big actress at that time. The books, films, and documentaries that were made about her ability to concoct a false account of what happened without batting an eye, her ability to get into and stay in character like she is on the set of a movie, her ability to convince that guy to let her stay with him. Also, this grand trine is showing that she's not going hard time. She has adjusted to prison life rather well. And it was reported that after she escaped and was recaptured, she's been displaying good behavior while in prison. Venus and Jupiter semi-square Gemini South Node, sesqui-square Sagittarius North Node. Represents the time Diane defied the court order and took her daughter for a ride. So during the investigation, she was barred from having contact with her children, either during the investigation or during the trial. I forget which one. But her ex-husband let her know where he was going to be with the kids, and she went there and he allowed her to take her daughter on a ride, which was crazy. Represents her promiscuity in college, which got her kicked out due to college Christian values. Her daughter Christy's ability to tell the truth conflicted with Diane's account of what happened. The prosecutor's methods with Christy helped to nail Diane. Now, a little more about this South Node in Gemini in the 4th house. This is, again, contributing to her compartmentalization and her ability to believe her own lies, because that 4th house is a subjective house. So she could imagine that something happened and start to really believe that's what occurred. Also, that 4th house Gemini South Node is representing how she's very controlled by her parents, her father in particular. Gemini South Nodes tend to be very controlled by their early upbringing. Like, they tend to be very attached to their early upbringing, and they tend to be very much influenced by their parents, whether it's one parent or both. And I believe that with Diane, the only people that could will control over her once she was an adult was her parents. That's why when she drove to the hospital, she was demanding to talk to her parents. Anybody else in her life, she was trying to control. And remember, I said I believe that her father was sexually abusing her. So if both her father and her mother are sticking to their lie about, oh no, there's no abuse going on, then Diane has no choice but to go along with it, because her parents are the only people in her life that she feels loves her and cares about her. So again, her daughter Christy's ability to tell the truth conflicted with Diane's account of what happened. The prosecutor's methods with Christy helped to nail Diane. So Venus and Jupiter is representing her daughter telling the truth. The Gemini South Node is representing Diane's story of what happened. And the Sagittarius North Node is representing the prosecutor. So let's talk about her asteroids. She has ascendant opposition academia. This shows that she becomes a great case study in personality disorders for psychology students. Ascendant opposition Electra. This can represent her hatred of her mother due to her love for her father, but it can also represent, you know, she feels some type of way about her mother because maybe her mother wasn't protecting her, mother wasn't defending her. And that's very much that Aries moon in the second house. Saturn contra parallel Amor, being obsessed with a lover. Neptune opposition Sedna, displaying a haughty attitude in videotaped interviews. Midheaven opposition Psyche, claims of being abused by father, parents denied it. Chiron opposition Nemesis, her children become her nemesis, so she tries to liberate herself from them, placing blame on her lover. He didn't want kids. Chiron opposition Eurydice. Eurydice often shows up in charts of people who have witnessed a death or who have survived the death of a loved one. It can also result in being stalked. So this is representing death of a child, also stalking a lover. South Node parallel Eurydice. Death of daughter occurs in the car, with the South Node being in Gemini and Gemini ruling cars. South Node conjunct Minerva. Daddy issues. She accused father of sexually abusing her, then she recanted her story. And I believe she recanted her story because her parents got in her ear and was like, you know, that didn't happen. And so they were gaslighting her again. Again, this is speculation on my part, but I believe that is what contributed to Diane's mental health issues. South Node conjoined to Pandora. The card provides all the evidence the police need. So again, South Node and Gemini representing the car. Pandora can deal with where information is revealed, released, damning information. South Node conjunct Amor, allowing a lover to wield too much influence over her mind. He didn't want kids, so they had to go. Gemini rules the conscious mind, and when you got South Node and Gemini, there could be issues with you thinking on your own, or where someone could be controlling you, could be mind programming your mind, things like that. So with the South Node in that fourth house, again, we're talking about pure subjectivity and where her emotions can cloud her logic. So again, she got with a guy that didn't want kids. South Node could join to Amor, and she basically said, okay, he don't want kids, I'm going to fix it. I'm going to make sure that I'm going to give him what he wants. Venus contra parallel Lilith. Her attempt to liberate herself from her children, killing her daughter Christy. Venus contra parallel Estrella. Taking a love affair too far, taking the children off the beaten path, and also this represents the trial. So on the night where she tried to murder her 3 children, she was coming from a friend's house and she drove out the way. She went on some, you know, dark, deserted road instead of going straight home because she wanted to kill the children. She wanted to do it where, I'm sorry, my cat is acting up. She wanted to do it where, you know, nobody would be able to see what was going on. Venus parallel Pallas represents her need for approval from men, beginning with her father. Pallas in the 10th, her anger towards her father for giving her mother all the attention instead of her. But again, I think it's more than that. And remember what I said, that Aries moon that can deal with mom comes first, or it's all about mom. Venus conjunct Veritas. Veritas deals with the truth. Much of the case against her rested on the testimony of her surviving daughter, Christy, who, once she recovered her ability to speak, described how her mother shot all 3 children while parked at the side of the road, then shot herself in the arm. Here's Christy, Diane's daughter, as an adult. Some parallel Shiva. Shiva is the destroyer. Destroying her children's lives represents incriminating evidence found in the car, with Shiva being right on the 3rd house cusp. The 3rd house deals with cars. So she has Taurus on the 3rd house cusp, which explains her driving very slowly. So witnesses reported that they saw her driving about 5 to 7 miles per hour towards the hospital, and this brought attention on her. So she was driving so slow, hoping that her children would die in the process before she got to the hospital. This shows how depraved she is. Sun opposition Valentine, choosing a lover over her children, also represents her lover not wanting children. Pluto contra parallel Valentine. Children have to be eliminated so she could satisfy lover's dictates. Also being dangerously obsessed with a lover. Jupiter conjunct Niobe. Niobe deals with tragic circumstances involving children, and it can deal with the death of a child. Represents her gloating and taking joy in the tragic circumstances she brought upon her children. Mars conjunct Vesta. Safeguarding the gun, but this can also represent prostitution. So she prostituted herself basically when she escaped prison, and she knocked on the guy's door, showed the guy her breasts, and basically she was given sex in exchange for her being able to hide at his home. But I wouldn't be surprised if she had engaged in prostitution before that, because we're talking about a malignant narcissist. Sun parallel Aldebaran. So let's get into her fixed stars. Aldebaran can play out as popularity. So she did earn popularity, but in the worst way. Courage. I would say it does take courage to shoot yourself in the arm. Warmongering, agitation, danger, loss, violent death. The violent death is pertaining to her daughter. Sun conjunct Dove. A dove deals with astrology, but also arrogance, psychic power, and destruction. Venus parallel Ascellus Australis, mass murder. And with her trying to kill all three of her children, that would equate to mass murder. Horrors, self-will, uncooperative. Jupiter parallel Sham, being combative, opinionated, jealous. Oh, another thing I wanted to mention about that South Node in Gemini, if you watch her interviews and her parole hearing, she just drones on and on and on. This woman can talk, and it gets very, very annoying and draining. But that's that Gemini South Node. A lot of Gemini South Nodes are very loquacious. They can't stop talking. Saturn conjunct Zubin El Janubi. This star can manifest as loss, theft, betrayal, abuse, venereal disease, poisoning, drowning, anguish, revenge, and criminality. Uranus conjunct Aludra. Dangerous passions, danger from or fear of darkness and night. So she did attempt to kill her 3 children at night, so that could deal with that. Uranus parallels Zosma. Keen intellect, depression, fearful, unhappy, feels restricted, loss in childhood. And the loss in childhood could pertain to the loss of her innocence in childhood. Egotism. Neptune parallel Alphard, Pluto conjunct Alphard. Alphard pertains to knowledge of human nature, which I believe she did have. Strong passions, lack of self-control, immorality, sudden death by poison or drowning. I wouldn't be surprised if she did think about poisoning or drowning her children before deciding to shoot them. Problems with law, love affairs, drugs. Pluto conjunct Adhafera. Crime, lying, and stealing, suicide. Chiron conjunct Altair. Impulsiveness, courage, accidents, astrology, writing, great imagination, strong passions, indomitable will, dominating character, penetrating mind. The astrology references, this is basically representing the astrologers who did readings on her chart. But she could also be into astrology too. North Node conjunct Shala and Lasaph. These 2 stars have similar meanings. Danger, desperation, immorality, malevolence, mesmerism. And she was able to mesmerize some men. I don't get it, because she was not a looker, but it doesn't matter. Like, them narcissists, they have a way of mesmerizing others. And she could have used her sex to mesmerize men. Accidents, catastrophes. South Node parallel Hamal. Healers. So this represents the doctors and nurses, but also Hamal can play out as violence, cruelty, and brutality. South Node conjunct Al-Heka. Power, greed, aggression. Ascendant conjunct Castra. destructiveness, uncontrollable temper, malevolence. Ascendant parallel Dabit, tendency to melancholy, trouble through sexual relationships. Here she is. This is Anne Rule right here, the one that wrote the book Small Sacrifices. Here's Diane in an interview with her and Oprah. So let's get into her Arabic part. She has Mercury and Mars opposition part of increase. She wanted to have more children, but hubby had a vasectomy, so she got pregnant by another man. And she was going to continue to get pregnant if she wouldn't have been stopped. Mercury and Mars conjunct Arabic part of death. Represents her plan to kill her children for a man. And it represents the death of Cheryl, her daughter. And basically her shooting. Moon opposition part of goods. She was a mail carrier, so this opposition could deal with that. Could also represent her commissary items while she's in prison. Sun opposition part of discord. So Diane sowing seeds of discord between her and her children, but also her lover. Neptune opposition private enemies can represent a man who turned her in after he let her stay with him for a couple of weeks. So here is the transits of the night of the murder. It occurred on May 19th, 1983. So the main transit dealing with this situation is transiting Saturn square Uranus in Cancer. This can play out as a sudden breakup or separation, a major upset or upheaval, attempting to bypass a law, rule, or important step in a process, an embarrassing defeat, being bullied, dealing with hate or animosity, refusing to comply or cooperate, disruption, destruction. Being extremely willful, refusing to back down, a sudden interruption, disgust, facing dire consequences, being in a precarious position, a period of instability. The fat lady is singing. The consequences of being short-sighted, and she did attempt those murders in a very short-sighted way. Being blindsided with bad news. The bad news for her was that two of her children survived. The ugly truth, protesting, a decrease in autonomy, the removal of liberties. So the being bullied part, of course, she's going to think she's being bullied by the police. Transiting Neptune in Sagittarius, quincunx Uranus in Cancer. Basically, this shows that she was allowing the yearning to free herself of motherhood to take over. Also represents the hospital staff with raised eyebrows over her weird demeanor. Transiting North Node in Gemini, semi-square Jupiter in Leo. Represents her story that conflicts with the truth, which will later come out through her surviving daughter. So she had her inverse nodal return approaching, which is very telling. Transiting Mercury in Taurus, squared Mercury and Mars in Leo. This is representing the witnesses that saw Diane driving very slowly towards the hospital. Also the evidence in the car that goes against her account of the shooting of her children. Transiting Moon in Virgo, quincunx Moon in Aries. Diane having to face the police and blaming it on a man. Transiting Pluto was approaching a conjunction with Neptune. This is representing the investigation, also her incarceration. So that concludes my video on Diane Downs. Let me know what you think. Thanks, Justin, for sponsoring this video. I will be back with some more videos, so stay tuned for that. If you would like a reading, you could go to my website. The link is in the description section.